I'd like to officially welcome all of you to today's session titled Supporting End of Life, Considering an End of Life Doula. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashton Bateman. I'm a support and education coordinator with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. I'm involved in most of our weekly webinars, and it's truly my pleasure to introduce you to today's guest presenter, Laurie DeCroos. Laurie is an end of life doula and has been a licensed practical nurse for the last 36 years. She also holds an advanced diploma in gerontology. And additionally, Laurie is a support and education coordinator, First Link, with a focus on a Northern Indigenous community outreach and collaboration for the Alzheimer's Society of BC's Northern Resource Centre. She has loved, lived, and worked all of her life in northern communities of Alberta and British Columbia.
Well, thanks for having me here today. Before I get started, I'd also like to acknowledge that I am presenting today on the traditional unceded territories of the Lheidli T'enneh, whose settler's name is Prince George, BC. So thank you. So we're, like Ashton mentioned, we're going to be talking about supporting end of life and considering an end of life doula. So the overview for today will be, we will be discussing what is an end-of-life doula, the End-of-Life Doula Association of Canada, the roles of a doula, how can a doula help you? How can you access an end-of-life doula? Why don't we talk about dying? A good death, ceremonies and rituals, vigil, and after-death care. So death sees us as all equally. It doesn't choose one person over another. It does not pick us based on who we are, the choices we make, the language we speak, the color of our skin, who we pray to, who we vote for, or who we kiss. None of us are immune. Yes, we are all going to die. And we do deserve to be cared for with dignity, compassion, and kindness. So you may have heard a few ways a death doula could be named. So death doula is one, end of life doula is another, or soul midwife, death midwife is another. But doula is the Greek word meaning one who helps, or female servant. A doula is generally a trained non-medical professional of extraordinary compassion and kindness. The person brings emotional, practical, and unbiased support and expertise to those nearing death or who have even been diagnosed with a terminal illness such as cancer or dementia. The person is often called upon to provide guidance, comfort, calm support, and education for the dying person, the caregiver, and their families. The End of Life Doula Association of Canada is a self-regulated organization with their own scope of practice, vision, and mission, but they are not yet to be part, or they are not yet part of the standard support. Someone can hire a doula on a personal level, and that doula can then go into their homes and work with them into long-term care facilities or to a palliative environment or hospice as a private practitioner. The goal is to be a part of the healthcare circle. The doula's approach is holistic, individual, person-centered, quality care. End-of-life doulas are emerging as an important new form of community-based caregiving and support systems. So death work has been around since the beginning of time. But the very first formal use of the word doula to describe a specific end-of-life accompaniment was employed by the Doula to Accompany and Comfort program, a grassroots volunteer-driven model launched in 2001 through the New York University Medical Center's Department of Social Services. The aim of this was to focus on social, psychological, and spiritual needs of individuals who are at risk of isolation during the dying process. So you can look at end of life doulas, a midwife or a doula that we're more familiar with that brings people into the world. An end of life doula helps people with their journey out of the world. So, why do people call us? The process of dying can span over days, weeks, months, and even years. Doulas, using a holistic approach, can help with supporting and planning for future, excuse me, future planning for people with a diagnosis or illness. Doulas support dying with dignity and a good death. When someone is dying and the person or the people that love them are preparing to say goodbye, often fear, panic, and uncertainty and raw emotions are heightened. Decision making becomes very difficult during this time. A doula can provide the support and guidance to help them make it through. A doula can also provide much more than the comfort and support. They offer a safe place for people to say whatever they need to, whenever they need to. People call doulas because we consistently remind them they are not alone through this. Each doula brings a different set of skills, experience, talents, passions to their work. Some doulas work in hospice and palliative care. Some have private businesses with hourly rates. The End of Life Doula Association of Canada provides a referral service of trained doulas that you can look at in your area. Costs range from $45 to $100 an hour, depending on the service, location, duration. But many doulas offer packages as well. Some doulas may also specialize in dying and dementia care. So you may be wondering, okay, well, what kind of services does a doula offer? A lot of people think it just might be that end of life vigil component, but a doula can be accessed well before that. They can provide education about death and grief. By connecting early in the journey, this can help the dying and the caregiver prepare for anticipated life changes moving forward. They can help with personal planning and advanced care planning, such as power of attorney, will, and NBCR representative agreements. They can also help with having the discussion and learning more about medical assistance in dying or MAID. Often doulas early on support the family or the person dying with a life review. The life review are conversations that the doula may have with the dying person about the things that really made them happy in their life, or perhaps the things that were sad, or maybe things that they've had regrets. And sometimes these things are hard to talk to the people we love, or family, or our spouses. And when the dying person can speak to a doula and talk about maybe regrets or things they just need to get off their mind and need to tell somebody, the doula is a great option here. The doula can also do coordination of community resources, such as perhaps arranging extra supports for the home through nonprofit or private agencies, Meals on Wheels, other companionships or activities. They also can do facilitation and communication between family and friends. Sometimes family and friends are at a distance or are at odds about maybe what the dying person's plan is moving forward. The doula can also do aids of daily living, so such as bathing, dressing, toileting. They also can help with logistical matters. Assist with setting up visiting hours, perhaps, so that the care partner or the spouse or family can rest and the person that is dying can rest. They can do shopping, errands, meal preps. They can offer transportation to appointments. Also, light household duties. They can provide respite care and companionship. And when we speak about supporting people with dementia, there is a time where respite care and companionship can become really important. And this is another option that you can use to support the person who's dying and has dementia. The doula can do education on what to expect when someone is dying, approaching the end as well. So, the different phases of dying. They can do planning and organizing and also sitting vigil. They could provide holistic supports to the dying by healing touch, music therapy, animal therapy, whatever the person's preference would be. They provide education on after death care of the body, after death support notifications, communicating with funeral directors. They can help in obituary writing and provide the needed support. They could provide support with the funeral home, and that might be the day of the funeral. They can help in creating rituals and ceremonies and making sure that the families can do their ceremony and their ritual. So, work with hospice and maybe hospital teams to ensure the person gets what they need. They can work with family on funeral plans and with the person who is dying. A doula works on legacy projects with the dying. And maybe that legacy is through their art or creating a cookbook for family. Perhaps it's personal stories that they want to share and pass down, or the history of when they were young. They also support the removal of online identity and social media accounts after death. And many times we don't think about this to close mom's Facebook account, Instagram, all those sort of things. And we really want people to connect early on. By connecting with a doula early in a diagnosis, the doula can guide and support the dying individual and their caregiver on what to expect going forward to and after death. With the diagnosis of dementia, planning ahead earlier in the disease process allows the dying individual to voice what they want to happen in their journey. What do they want it to look like going forward? And to the very end, days and moments prior to death. Sometimes dementia can bring on many changes and emotions to the person living with dementia or their care partners or families. A doula can help families work through their emotions and the long grieving process early on, prior to, and also after death. Doulas use a person centered approach, recognizing everyone as a unique individual with individual values, needs, wants, culture, tradition, religion. Now, one of the things that I find really interesting and is why aren't we talking about dying? Take a moment and just think, why don't we talk about dying? And if you have any thoughts, pop it in the chat. Some of the reasons maybe we don't know how to talk about it. Maybe it's because we're not sick or we're young and we think we're immortal, or we don't understand the illness. Maybe we don't want to upset someone, even though we know it may be good for them to process through their emotions and feelings around dying. And often it can be fear and grief. And when it comes to we're not sick or we're young, we are all dying. We never know when our clock will run out. So to talk about these things is important. The greatest gift we can give to those left behind once we die is to have all of our affairs in order so our loved ones don't have to live with assumptions of, have I done what they wanted in a way that they wanted to happen?
Laurie, I just want to share a few of the
Yep,
things that came up in the chat when you asked,
sure, absolutely.
why we don't talk about it.
Sure.
Someone shared, I think we all tend to avoid things we don't want to face. So,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely.
That's a
Someone
great,
else afraid to talk about dying for fear of saying the wrong thing or hurting someone's feelings.
that's right, not knowing what to say. Yeah,
Someone else said we are a death denying culture and it makes us uncomfortable.
makes us uncomfortable
Absolutely.
is another really good one. Yeah.
And we've got a few questions that have been coming up.
Yep.
Lori,
Yep.
I'll
Go
maybe
ahead.
save a few for the end, but one
Okay.
just in relation to the services offered
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of
Mm-hmm.
went through.
Sure.
Someone asked, since doulas are self-regulated, do the services offered vary between doulas? So
Oh, yes.
in other words, does each doula set the parameters around what services they may or may not provide from those listed? So that's from Jessica.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great question actually. And yeah, so every doula often will have a preference as well about what part of the process that they prefer. Some doulas may prefer just the vigil portion of the dying process. Some doulas prefer the early on conversations and engagement and speaking and educating about death, but also creating life legacies as well. So, yes, everybody has sort of a different preference. Every doula can sort of do all of the things, but you'll often find that certain ones have different components that they sort of specialize in or prefer. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Thanks for that, Lori. Yeah, there's a few more coming up, but I think I'll just save them until
Okay,
the end, and then we can see
sure,
if
absolutely.
they're answered. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So, to talk a little bit about good death or dying well. So, Sigmund and Freud said that we are incapable of imagining our own deaths. Even though we know we can imagine someone else's demise, we are convinced of our own immortality. As a result, we give little or no thought to how we would like our last days and moments to be, or, for that matter, even what we need to do to ensure that our wishes will be even carried out. And that kind of brings me to that point where I said that we're all dying, we don't know when. So the sooner we can have conversations about what we want our death to look like and what we want to have honored and what is important, the better it will be later going forward if we lose our voice, such as in dementia, and we can no longer maybe share what we want. But most of all, we leave out the assumptions that family have to make. Oh, I don't know. Did dad want to be cremated? Did he want to be buried? Does he want a funeral? Did he not want a funeral? Did he like this suit? Or did he want to wear his pajamas? There's so many things that can just make the difference in the dying process and lead to that good death, because one of the things with a good death is knowing that as a person who's dying that your decisions will be honored by your family. So, being able to give specific information as to how the person would want to die. Um, so, good death is for some is being pain free and to experience emotional well-being by addressing the quality of life they want in the time before their death. Also, it may include religion or spirituality. It may be the dying want to be able to make choices in the treatments they receive, be treated with a dignified manner, and have a good relationship with the treating providers, have good relationships with family and friends, or resolve um, maybe things that were unresolved before with family and friends. Being with family members and saying goodbye is also important in a good death. When the dying comment on their experience at the deathbed, the vision of previously departed loved ones, it can help to calm and soothe them so that they may also have a more peaceful death themselves. So I'm going to just share for a couple moments, just a little bit about some support I'd done with Elizabeth and Robert. Elizabeth had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 4, and she had chose MAID. And they had called me over a few times just to visit and also as a witness for their MAID paperwork. Um, but just more for Robert. He had a tough time watching Elizabeth's decline, and he was with her 24/7, didn't want to have any other supports around. And we had many conversations about why he needed to be there 24/7, why he felt he needed to do everything. And it finally, after multiple conversations, Robert felt comfortable enough to talk about the fact that it was his grief. He was afraid that she would die without him there, so he would not leave her side. And he was concerned, even though he agreed with Elizabeth's wishes for Maid, he was still had trouble with the fact that that was the end. And again, after multiple conversations, Robert was became more comfortable with the thought of Maid and the intention of what it was going forward in terms of Elizabeth's quality of life. And Elizabeth and Robert were able to speak clearly with each other's about the feelings about Elizabeth dying. And Elizabeth never ended up using Maid. She took a turn for the worse and she passed, and Robert was able to be there when it did happen. But it was really about the conversations beforehand that they needed a safe place other than family to talk about their grief and their experiences that they were having. So I'll take a minute just to talk about some rituals and ceremony. So some people's ritual and ceremonies tie in with their culture, religion, or spiritual practice. For some, beliefs in spiritual path become very important at the end of life. And during ceremony and rituals, for some, it is believed to be a time of the dying transition to a different realm. And if not performed or participated in, the soul sits in limbo between earth and heaven. Sometimes rituals and ceremonies is built into spiritual practice by acknowledging and discussing these options with the dying and family. It can provide comfort and peace during a time perhaps they need it the most. A doula can help in honoring ritual and ceremony before and after death by assisting or organizing what is needed to be done. The most common aspects of rituals and ceremonies generally tap into one's senses, such as sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. So, wakes, drumming, um, and feast. On vigil work. So, vigil for death is a solemn and respectful occasion, a sacred time when you come together with family and friends to remember and honor one's life of the dying and to support each other through the grieving process. This could be done through candles, prayers, singing, chanting, eating, and sharing. To sit with someone who is dying can be an honor at this holy time as the soul prepares the transition from their vessel. To be able to support the dying wishes by creating a personal, comfortable, inviting space for them and those invited to gather around the bedside is truly a privilege and a gift. Vigil work is a conversation to be had early on in the illness or advanced directive planning stage. It's a good time for the dying to express personal hopes, desires, and it offers them a sense of choice in their path and their feeling of being included of what is happening forward. This becomes especially important when we are supporting someone living with dementia as their level of cognition declines towards the end of life. Their ability to communicate their desires, needs, and wants will become no more. After death, care. If it was the wish of the dying in the family, a doula can do the anointing of the body with frankincense and myrrh. A doula can do or guide families in doing the after death bath as a way to honor the family or in the body, sorry. The family then can dress the body in a way that the dying had wished. So, lastly, I'm going to share a little bit about Genevieve's story. So, Genevieve was my mom, and in January of 2017, Jenny received a unexpected diagnosis of stage 4 bladder cancer. And it was a really hard diagnosis to hear. And when she asked her doctor, what is this prognosis? My mother was also a nurse. They told her a year if she was lucky. So after taking her home and sitting with her for a while, we had to think of a plan, think about, okay, there's some conversations to be had here. So I sat down with my mom and over multiple sittings, and we talked about how she was feeling about dying and she wasn't afraid about death. She was more worried about those left behind, her family and her grandchildren. And when we talked about what she wanted, what did she want her death to look like? And she would joke, she said, well, for one, after I die, she said, I'm coming back as blue butterflies. And we always had a little snicker about that. And now we all look for blue butterflies. But we talked about her advanced directive and what did she want to have done, knowing that, she could change it should she want to. And she chose that she would try radiation. And after that, not having any success, she just chose to have a short quality of life rather than extending it with further radiation or chemotherapy. So we sat with my mom and we had some tough discussions about, Mom, do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? What do you want that to look like? And she said, well, I want to be cremated. My dad had passed away in 2009 of cancer, and we had his ashes, and she just wanted to be buried with the ashes with her dog and my dad. And we thought, well, that's good. And then it was like, well, we didn't even know where she wanted to be buried. So then she went on to tell us, well, depending on who died first is what cemetery they would go to. So being that my dad passed away first, they would uh, be buried in his cemetery, country cemetery. So then it was, oh, well, I guess that means we need to get a plot or a spot. So we had to arrange that. And then we went on talking about funeral plans and what that would look like. And she didn't want a funeral. She just said, maybe just some friends or a celebration. And then we talked about what would that look like in the end when she was dying? Who did she want there? And she said, she wanted her two daughters beside her and her grandkids and her family. And we were able to make that happen. But we also said, what if something happened and maybe we all couldn't be there? What would that look like? And she was okay with that because she would be in hospice and she worked in hospice and she knew everybody and she knew she wouldn't be alone. So that provided her a bit of comfort. And we had a few laughs there too. But the doula has those tough conversations about even what do you want to wear after death, right? Do you want your family there with you? Because sometimes people wait till family's gone before they die. And it's good to know if they would want somebody there or not, because often people want to be there, and if they're not there, they just hold such grief that they couldn't be there. So to know that when the dying person says, I'm okay if you can't make it, or I don't want anybody there, offers just a little bit of relief to families. So there's a lot of conversations to be had going through, and my mom had many artworks and all kinds of stuff. So who was getting what and when, and we played her favorite music. We crawled in the bed with her in hospice. Um, it was truly a wonderful experience, and looking back, I don't think I would we could do it any different. We honored everything that we could that she wanted, and she was able to pass away peacefully. So again, a doula can help right from the very beginning to the very end point of the journey. And my mom lived until September 25th of 2017. So she didn't quite make it a year. So dying is not an event, it's a journey. Thank you, everybody who took the time to listen to me today, and I will welcome any questions or thoughts that you might have going forward.
We do have some questions that came
Sure.
up, so I figured I'll pop on
Okay.
and we can go through them since we've got some time.
Sure.
Um, so someone had asked, and we do have a link to the association in our helpful resources document, but someone had asked what training, or sorry, are doulas required to be registered with the Canadian Association, like helping profession or like other helping professions such as nurses, social workers? So
Hmm.
is that a requirement?
Um, they should have training. So there are various places you can get training, but not everyone uh, is registered through the association. So I'm just going to use an example for myself. I'm a member, but I am not registered because I don't have a business. I am just do it for friends and family and by word of mouth just because it's something that I really love to do. But there are people who make it a business and are generally will be registered through the End of Life Association of Canada. And again, that they will try to connect you with someone in their area.
Great, thank you. Someone also just asked if you can share the references slide again,
Oh,
if
sure.
possible,
Absolutely. I sure
just to
can.
pop that up. The other question that someone had, Laurie, was
Mhm.
what training um, do doulas have with complex trauma and blended families with conflict and or avoidance?
Um, that's a really good question. And so the training itself, um, wouldn't I would say it doesn't cover a whole lot of that, but as a doula and developing education, so if one of my specialties were perhaps supporting people with complex trauma, that would be something that to promote my business, I would want to take extra education supports on. Does that make sense? So that would be when you have that conversation with the doula, it would be okay, what are you interested in having? Um, or what kind of service would you find beneficial? So that's where you'd want to make sure that, do they have any training in that area, right? Because again, everyone is different. Everyone has the basics. So, but over and above that, they take extra training.
Someone else had asked if
Mm.
doulas can navigate within tertiary care hospitals. Um, it sounds like their person that they are caring for has late stage dementia. So
Mm-hmm.
they're wondering if doulas can be in tertiary care.
Yeah, they can absolutely because if we're hired independently, right? So um, we can absolutely go in to support anybody in care. Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you. Someone else said, they said, I've taken some training in trauma informed care. Have you experienced discrimination directed towards Indigenous or LGBTQ2S folks from healthcare staff? And if so, how did one handle that?
That's a super good question. I have not experienced so much because I just do it privately. I don't go in per se. So a doula is there to be with the dying and the family. So I mean, they will interact with staff supporting the family. So, if there's something that isn't right, the doula can act on that behalf. But they are there to support the person in a way that supports them the most. So it doesn't matter what their background, who they are, culture, they're there to support you in that way, right? Not in a way that we think that should happen, right? So a difference might be is when it's supporting Indigenous peoples, we would advocate for tradition and ceremony if they were in the hospital. So we would work with the hospital to say, hey, this is really important to them. Is there a space? Is there a place? Or is there a way that they can perform these things? And so we can work that way to try to get things done in a way that's meaningful and helpful and culturally appropriate.
In your experience, have you found that healthcare teams in acute or long-term care-based settings are welcoming slash inclusive to end-of-life doulas?
Um, and probably one of the situations that I can think of for myself, I would say yes, because we're there supporting um, the person who's dying in the family. We're not there to intervene in any um, process or treatment, right? Um, and it also takes it away from healthcare in event that uh, the family requires maybe more support with grief or vigiling or that sort of thing, where maybe healthcare maybe would have felt that they would have had to step in prior. So I have not heard from any of just even colleagues that are doulas that have had issues working with healthcare teams or with hospice or anything like that.
you.
It's new, so it's just a really getting used to. Like I said, it's only been around since about 2001 in that formal capacity, more formal capacity. But the goal is to, become more part of that healthcare team, right? And maybe eventually even have end of life doulas as healthcare staff, right? I could see that would be a really great benefit.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's great when we can. I'm so glad that you were able to present today and just give everyone some more information because some people may not
Hmm.
have heard of end of life doulas
Hmm.
and are maybe navigating this or planning for the future. So just
Yeah.
really good to be informed on what the options and resources are. So so wonderful that we're able to get all of that from you today. And
Mhm.
one question
Pleasure.
as well would be, so if someone was looking to, say, hire a doula, or
Hmm.
where would be
Hmm.
the best place to start?
I would probably suggest if they have hospice and palliative care, often there are doulas that are working in hospice and palliative care that might be able to offer support and insight because they may also have, a side that they help others if the person who's dying is not in hospice and palliative care. Also, I would look on the End of Life Association Canada, Doula Association of Canada, that one as well. There's a handful of people registered on there. And of course, you always want to ask questions like anything else, right? See perhaps a training certificate, right? Make sure they're bondable or have a criminal record check. Just like anything else for people that are private and we let into our homes, we want to make sure that those things are in place. And if they can't provide that, that may be a flag, right? So, always ask them lots of questions and, um, you don't want to just be inviting someone into your home that will take advantage of you.
Thank you. Someone else had asked, what is the expectation on the number of hours that someone can hire an end of life doula? So I guess is there like typically a number of hours, or does
Mhm.
it vary?
Well, it could go hourly. So people can hire, you can hire someone hourly and maybe it's just for some questions or maybe respite, right? But also, depending on the need, or the want of the family and the person who's dying, the doulas will often have packages that will say, okay, this includes this, 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 and this up to end of life. Um, because some people might not want vigil. So you could take that component out. Maybe they just want to make it through that first part. How do we get things organized? What do we need to know? What do we need to get in place now? Can someone help me with that? And they may have a package for that as well. So many doulas do have just sort of packages so that you're not paying hourly rate all the time.
Thank you. This person had also asked if the service can only be provided in person. So maybe kind of wondering about virtual
No,
offerings.
it can be done virtual. I've done actually a few virtual. And again, I do it for people who know, like someone knows somebody that knows I do this kind of thing, and I get connected. But I've done a few virtually for sure. Um, and mainly, one of them was about when a person is going through MAID, what can we have in the room? What can we bring?
Mhm.
Who can be there? Can we crawl in the bed with him? Can we have music? Can we do? So it was really having the conversation about that. And the other one was just really supporting a family through the grief and what to expect going forward. So it was through Zoom.
Another question just came through. So in terms of the registration, so to be registered with the association, do doulas have to submit a current criminal record check, et cetera? So some of
Yes.
that
Hmm.
pre-screening is complete for families?
Yes. Yep. They do. Yep. And often you can actually look at a bio and it will have different things on it as well that says, maybe if they have specialties, because some do healing touch, some have different added things to their portfolio. So you can kind of look through as well. Yeah.
So probably a good place to look would be probably on the association website. Would that be to
Hmm.
kind of look
Yep.
for?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll just leave our dementia helpline information up. Thank you so much again, Lori, for taking some time out of your day and just giving us some information on what an end of life doula can do to support end of life and just kind of get the conversation started. So thank you so,
Great.
so much again.